Good morning. At least it's morning where I am. This is March the 29th, 2020. Like the rest of the world, we are in the grips of the COVID-19 pandemic. We are also in the midst of a legislated stay-at-home process. A state of disaster has been announced in South Africa, and we are trying, like the rest of the world, to respond to the disease and the threat of the virus on a national and communal level. I have not posted videos for some time, but I thought this would be an appropriate time to try and contribute something to the general discussion and or attempt to respond to this crisis. And therefore I'm doing a short series, or a series, I'm not sure how short it will end up being, on resilience. So maybe I can start there. I can speak a little bit about how I am going to think about and define resilience. I think for the most part, most people will tend to define resilience as the ability to bounce back. And that's fine as far as it goes, but I would like to suggest that resilience is maybe more about a type of growth, a type of development that will not lead you back to where you used to be prior to a crisis, but will leave you changed in some, and hopefully a meaningful way. In terms of resilience, I think there are two broad channels or broad areas of application. The first is how to respond immediately to crises. So one is living one's life and something unexpected happens, as does or as is vividly portrayed by this viral infection across the world. People expected this, but for the most part, most of us lived our lives as if the threat of a pandemic was mostly an academic exercise. So few people expected this level of threat and the kind of impact that it has and will have on our everyday lives. So in the first place, resilience is a way or an approach to respond to immediate threat or immediate crises or an immediate shift in one's circumstances that is generally regarded as detrimental. I should add that this series is, of course, not aimed specifically only at this crisis that the world is experiencing now, but the principles should be applicable to most things that people regard as crisis, whether it has to do with health or loss or other forms of disruptive experience, divorce, job loss, economic crises, etc., etc. Okay, so the first one is the immediate attempt to respond to crises, unexpected crises. The second channel, or maybe perspective, has to do with preparing the self for the inevitable crisis that will come in the future. I think most people try to actually live a life devoid of crisis, of course, but it ends up becoming a psychological state where we assume that because we have some control over our environment and our relationships now, no crisis will emerge or impact on us, that we are fully capable of, in some way, denying fate its place. Again, the current moment in history certainly suggests to hopefully all of us that we are far less in control of fate than we would like to be. So the second perspective or channel has to do with preparing the self for crises. And even if that crisis is not currently on the horizon or is not currently known. Of course, these two do overlap because in responding to an immediate crisis, or in responding in a way that builds up the inner and outer resources and ways of thinking, one is almost inevitably preparing yourself, growing yourself in a direction where you will be able to respond to future crises as well. All right, so these are the two main perspectives or channels that I will be speaking about. Okay, so how will I go about speaking about this? If you are like me, you've already been exposed to or maybe even inundated with all kinds of practical suggestions how to go about dealing with different aspects. The one example I can use at the moment is all the different ways people are figuring out how to make face masks or to protect themselves and others from the airborne particles that carry the virus. There are many others as well, but many other suggestions and approaches that have been circulated. So inevitably, some of the things that I will say that refer to practical response to crises or to development in the time of crises will also include practical types of suggestion or types of approaches. I'm not going to, for instance, show another way or a similar way of making a mask or purifying water or whatever the particular topic is that might be at hand. So I will be speaking more about practical ways of thinking, probably, rather than particular examples of practical application. I would also like to, where it's possible for me, include what I would term more sort of psychologically relevant and meaningful ways of thinking about a crisis, maybe even sometimes symbolic thinking. Of course, not every one of these two approaches will appeal to everyone. Some people will be more focused on the practicalities, and that is the tendency in crisis to focus on that. But for some people, the latter approach would be meaningful because people, not everyone, but a lot of people have the desire and the need for a more comprehensive framework of understanding. And I hope that I can contribute to this. All right, so this is the introductory video. I will start posting the more themed, or let's say themed videos subsequently, and I'll try to number them. You will notice that I also have other videos on this channel, and you are welcome to watch those as well, although they may not be particularly relevant to resilience or the idea of resilience, but you might find them interesting and useful. They also include certain practical tips and clues and ideas. I would very much appreciate it if you would participate in the conversation in the form of questions or suggestions. I certainly am not omniscient enough to know what might be interesting to everyone. I've already had a couple of suggestions, and I'll try to address those, because every suggestion, of course, that I don't think about probably means that there are a whole lot of other people who have similar or the same questions or ideas. If you find these videos valuable, I would request that you subscribe yourself, and if you think it might be worthwhile for other people to watch these, please send the links or invite other people to also subscribe. I hope that you are safe enough, that you are healthy enough, and that we can make a meaningful difference in this time of the rather difficult form history is taking. Good luck, and I'll speak to you soon.